Imago Dei, Ministering to the Margins, specifically how ministers can minister to the Hispanic community. Before we go into full mode of our assigned topic, I will just like to briefly talk about who we are as an institution and what the Association for Hispanic Theological Education does among the Hispanic community. So we are the Association for Hispanic Theological Education, better known as AETH. We are a network of individuals and institutions that since 1992 been working in the United States, Canada, Puerto Rico, and more recently, Latin America and the Caribbean. We are a faith-based nonprofit dedicated to promoting and improving biblical theological education and its impact in the life of individuals, churches, and communities with a specific intention, the Hispanic community. We actually have an affiliation with the Association of Theological Schools, AETH, since 2013, and we certify Bible Institute curriculums to improve the quality of the education that men and women receive through their Bible institutes and congregations. We are a community of experts, leaders who share a passion for promoting theological education from a Hispanic eyes to the world. And our network is made up of educators, researchers, directors of educational institutions, pastors, denominational leaders, NGO and FBO leaders, authors, scholars, students, and beyond. So let's jump into the subject. I consider myself a pastor, an educator, and administrator in that order. So as a good educator, there always has to be objectives. So we make sure we make a good use of our time. So with what I will be sharing with you this afternoon, it is my hope that I can generate some general awareness of the importance of cultural competency across ecclesiastical ecosystems as a response to ministering from the margins. Two, that I can provide every single one of us an up-to-date understanding of the geographical and social cultural changes within the Hispanic communities in the United States. Three, explore the importance of cultural awareness in creating a hospitality environment at your church and ministry. And fourth, explore practical solutions for worship experience, clergy and staff awareness, and how to welcome inclusive measures that can contribute to a more contextual church that ministers to Hispanic communities. So with that said, let's jump to the question. What does ministering Hispanic communities from the margin means or should mean to us? By 2060, the U.S. Hispanic Latino population is projected to reach nearly 98 million people, accounting for approximately 30% of the national population. And we're talking about accounting numbers here. That this means that 1 out of every 3 residents will be likely to be Hispanic or Latino descendant. And these numbers just reveal the importance of our Hispanic community within the communities we serve. Having said that, we also try to be very intentional to create the awareness that one size does not fit all. And it actually does not fit all, not only for Hispanic communities, but for other underserved communities, ethnic communities that are also represented among our communities. And so because we understand that we have a broad representation among the United States, we understand that creating a cultural awareness is not optional, but essential to educate ministers, clergy, and lay leaders among us. And, because I'm also an administrator, I just need to bring some numbers, right? Because numbers are fun and numbers are important. But before we go into those numbers, let's also summarize how some general approaches on how ministering to Hispanic communities should look like. First of all, anyone who's wanting to serve Hispanic communities or any underserved, marginalized community for that matter, should have a cultural awareness, a deep cultural awareness within its church. Ministries must move on beyond the one-size-fits-all model, affirming the dignity, the identity, and the belonging of Hispanic communities through practices that honor language, traditions, and generational diversity. But it also must embrace hospitality and belonging as theological mandates, right? Rooted in the Imago that, gets us here together in this Zoom meeting, and the body of Christ, culturally aware ministry, welcome Hispanic voices, not as guests adapting to dominant norms, but as co-creators, shaping the church's witness and mission. And third, a general approach when ministering to Hispanic communities, it's equipping for contextual leadership. Effective ministry invests in inclusive education, mentoring, and spiritual formation that empowers Hispanic leaders across generations, ensuring the church reflects the resilience, faith, and creativity of these communities. As per the 2020 census, you can see it here. The Hispanic population will represent 28 to 30% of the total population of the United States. If we want to see that by region, it will look something like this. We see a 19% growth on the West region, a 33% growth on the South region, a 25% growth on the Northeast region, and a 24% growth on the Midwest regions of our nation. So, depending on where are you located, this kind of information could shed some light around where is my church, where do I do ministry, and what is the potential of me serving marginalized Hispanics within my faith community. Also, over 60% of US Hispanic population is under the age of 35. And those are some great news. That brings a lot of potential to the table. That means that, 6 out of 10 Hispanics that we serve or that you serve are under 35, which brings so much richness and potential of legacy to our congregations. Now, with this understanding, we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to just grow the potential of those who are among us under 35 and also over 35 serving our communities, right? How are we developing their gifts and talents for the benefit of the kingdom and the church? How are we enabling them with their charismas and with their gifts to serve the communities, their faith communities that they're engaging with? How are we projecting any succession path or any leadership opportunities within our faith communities to help them engage and build identity within the community that you are ministering and that they are now, serving. So the only reason I share these statistics is just to bring awareness to the fact that, the Hispanic Latino community, which is what the community we are specifically talking about today in this Zoom session, has indeed growth and has brought so much richness and growth capital to this nation. And we need to understand that they're among us. And because they're among us, we need to also be ready, equipped, and willing to serve them. Some community facts, and this is, really fun facts. But for me, there are fun facts at least, but very interesting facts too. First and foremost, it is said that by 2050, Hispanics will be the largest minority and the fastest growing group of ethnic community in the country. Newborns, rather than immigrants, will be driving such population growth. So we're talking about, just babies being born in the next 25 to 30 years. 4 out of every 5 Latinos speak English, and then out of second generation Latinos, 95% of them speak Spanish. And this is important also to know, because sometimes we think that because an individual identifies himself or herself as Hispanic or Latino, by the way, using the terms interchangeably is very common, but it's actually not appropriate. Hispanics are entails those who speak Spanish. Latinos are those who are that come from South America, including Brazil. So when we talk about Latinos, we're actually including people from Brazil who speak Portuguese. So that's why, making that distinction is very important. And although us as Hispanic use the terms interchangeably, if we want to use them correctly, we will need to say Hispanics, right? If we're talking about Spanish speaking communities. But even then, we need to understand what type of Hispanics are we serving? Are we serving native Hispanics? Are we serving first generation Hispanics? Are we serving second or third generation Hispanics? Because depending on the first, second, third generation Hispanics, it will also bring a lot of influence in the way we shape and we serve those Hispanics from the margin. So 70% of native and first generation Hispanics identify themselves as being able to speak English, and 95% of second and third generation Hispanics, which English is their native language, identify themselves as being able to speak Spanish. So that means that, language is something to have into consideration, but language is not necessarily always, the winning solution or the necessary solution among our congregations, depending on our communities and depending on understanding the communities we are serving. So by the end of 2050, it is understand that 1/3 of church goers will be Hispanics. And this is important for us to know. And out of that third, that 1/3 of church goers, 25% will be most likely bilingual, because 25% of millennials today in the United States are Hispanics. So again, there's a great potential of the younger generation among our churches and our ministries. So with that said, for me, and this is something that I've said many, many times, and I'm actually writing a book on this as we speak, ministering from the margins, serving Hispanic communities, it's about hospitality. And to be very honest, it's not only serving Hispanic communities, it's just serving underserved communities or communities that are not from the main dominant group. It's about hospitality. And here I just used Harry Nguyen, which many of us or majority of us know. And this is how he defines hospitality. He says, hospitality means primarily the creation of a free space where the stranger can enter and become a friend. Hospitality is not to change people, but to offer them space where change can take place. It is not to bring men and women over to our side, but to offer freedom, not to disturb by dividing lines. The paradox of hospitality is that it wants to create emptiness, not a fearful emptiness, but a friendly emptiness where strangers can enter and discover themselves as created free, free to sing their own songs, speak their own languages, dance their own dances, free also to leave and follow their own vocations. Hospitality is not a subtle invitation to adore the lifestyle of the host, but the gift of a chance for the guest to find his own. So here I share with you some practical solutions, which I hope, ignites a conversation for the remainder of our time together. First and foremost, translating services or translating ministries or translating approach is not enough. And again, it might not even be necessary. Take into consideration that 70% of first generation and native Hispanics speak English, and taking into consideration that second and third generation Hispanics have English as their native language. Spanish is a necessity, but may not be the absolute answer to how we minister from the margins to Hispanic communities. Rather so, we should explore the totality of our ministry and the totality of the experience of how we do church and ministry in the communities that we have been called to serve. For example, how is our worship and service experience looking for Hispanics? Are we fostering accessible worship environments? Are we using cultural relevant translations and or resources like the Bible, like pieces of the scripture? Are we providing and guiding for diverse sources like music, instruments, rhythm, images that look like us? Are we incorporating Hispanic worship styles? Do we know the different type of Hispanic worship styles? Are we acquainted with Latin America theologians? Are we acquainted with Latin America history of Christianity? Do we know the scars, the pains, the high points, the low points that, give identity of who we are? Are we learning names of key Latin American theologians and clergy leaders? There's many of them. Same way, there's a lot here in the US, there's a lot over there too. And again, and I'll be saying this a couple of more times, it's not just a matter of translating, but transliterating, which means contextualizing the translation to the people we serve. Another practical solution is, how are we equipping our staff members or key staff members with cultural awareness and implicit bias, right? We all have implicit bias. We all have blind spots. How are we making them aware of such in ways that we can better serve from the margins, underserved communities? How we identify talent with a character and maturity for diversity. Does our staff look all the same, or does our staff provide for diversity? Are we providing for multilingual experience? Are we assuring some sort of key leadership roles are represented? With different ethnic diversity, not only Hispanic, but other host ethnic representation. Are we providing training for clergy and staff to be more inclusive in the way they teach, they preach, and they interact with it's in this specific space, Hispanic communities, and first, second, and third generation Hispanics. First generation Hispanics, often are the ones who have the biggest struggle with linguistics and have the strongest cultural ties with their mainland. But then we have second generation Hispanics, which are US born children, and they self identify as Hispanic, but they are really just navigating a bicultural or even a multicultural reality within their own context, right? Their native English, their native language is English. They speak English in school, but they come back home and they speak with their abuelita and Spanish, and cultural practices are still very present because of their parents and of their grandparents and their siblings. But then there's third generation Hispanics, which by now they have fully assimilated the American Anglo culture, but they do self-identify as Hispanics. So what's the mix in the community we are serving, you are serving? Are we talking about one individual? Are we talking about a dozen individuals? Are we talking about a majority of the church membership or attendees? And of those who you are able to identify, are they first generation, second generation, third generation? And how can we mix and match and balance in ways that we can serve them in very relevant ways? Definitely having your clergy and your staff trained for this, or at a minimum aware of these variances. It's key. Each generation brings unique strength, but also unique challenges, right? So, you know, again, there's not a one size fits all, but just you being here today and being able to hear this and create some sort of awareness is just a great step towards the right direction, because it talks about the willingness and the wanting to be relevant, in a faith context, to those who are seeking to grow their faith in a country that might not be theirs, right? So, which takes me to the next practical solution recommendation, and it's just celebrate and host cultural diversity within your church program or your ministry program, right? Have a general knowledge of cultural ethic, do's and don'ts, uh, what is important and what is less important. And just if this is not an invitation for us to know it all, but this is an invitation for us to extend our support system or our support network, right? We might not have all the answers. We might not have all the knowledge. We don't need to know it all, but we do need to know the people that know the solutions to the realities of the communities we're serving and the composition of our congregations. So create an environment that welcomes and values cultural diversity, right? The food, the music, the rhythms, the instruments, the way they're, the way they're dressed, the way they approach situations, just understand the significance of faith and family in Latin American culture. For us, a big phenomenon, yeah, it's just having people that have migrated that used to be of one faith tradition just joining our churches, um, not necessarily because it's the same faith tradition. I mean, they're all Christians, but not necessarily the same faith tradition, but because it's the only church around, right? So how do I approach that as a minister? How do I become contextual and relevant in ways that their faith can keep going, although their background, their faith background or upbringing might be different, right? So just at least having a general understanding of such differences, right? And again, going back to Henry Newen, it's not imposing what we're doing, it's helping others understand, right? At Baptists, we affirm that liberty is one of our big principles, right? So allowing them also the liberty to create different reference of their faith in this new experience. Know the importance of holidays and celebrate the holidays. And just as a funny note, El Cinco de Mayo, it's not one of them, right? We use the Cinco de Mayo as a way to celebrate something that is not really at all Hispanic or of Hispanic heritage. So, but get to know the holidays, right? January 6th, Epiphany, it's an ecclesiastical important date, and for Hispanics, it's as important as December 25th. So what could we do around January 6th, right? The history of the three wise men, the history of Epiphany and what does Epiphany means for the life of the church, and get to know those important holidays, and let's start celebrating them in ways that we can connect with the marginalized. Acknowledge and welcome the space of value systems, right? Family, relationships. I mean, the dynamics are so different. When you invite one Hispanic, there's a high possibility that 5 come to the invitation, although you just invited 1, right? And that's not seen as something negative. That's just the way our culture works, right? That's the way our value system works. So get familiarized with that, and the importance of family, and the importance of relationships, and the importance of true one-on-one connections in the things that we do. Also enable biblical inclusivity, right? Familiarize with Christian history, as I said before, in Latin American countries. Get to know the Spanish-speaking biblical societies and versions. By no means we need to learn them, but we need to know they exist. Like, what's the equivalent of King James? Was the equivalent of the New International Bible? Was the equivalent of the Message? Was the equivalent of Simple English? There's actually an equivalent for every single one of those in Spanish. So getting to know those equivalents is very important. There are over 20 generally accepted Bible versions in Spanish. So getting to know the equivalents is very important, because then you will be speaking their own language, not only literally, but also spiritually, right? In the ways that we can connect scripture from the main language to their own language, providing then linguistic inclusivity. Encourage churchgoers to integrate meaningful biblical teachings and preaching based on their culture and backgrounds, right? And have the openness for that, not be scared about it. Sometimes what is different can concern us and can scare us, but just embrace it as something new that allows for the space for all to belong. And make use of those elements in our teaching, in our preaching, making sure we're using as simple as images where underserved communities can feel they can relate to, or just ways of behaving and interacting among each other. Provide for contextualization of biblical teaching experience, right? What does that say to me, to my abuela, to my aunt, to my uncle? How does this speak to me differently? And encourage unity among Hispanic Christians with the church. Sense of belonging, it's huge, but sadly, many underserved communities that do not feel like they belong. They don't necessarily feel connected to the church they're being going to, because they don't feel represented. They're being served in some capacity, but they're not being represented. And that's where hospitality as an answer to the way we do ministry, and we minister to marginalized context and communities like Hispanic communities. It's where transformation really happens, right? Just that belonging sense, it's key. Hold on, give me 1 second. Something is ringing here. I'm so sorry. Give me 1 second. I apologize, but my computer just went ringing Waco, so I'm so sorry for that. So I was saying, so the sense of belonging, it's very important, not only for Hispanic communities, but just underserved communities, marginalized communities, overall, for us to be able to make a true impact and true transformation to those communities, rather than just fitting a quota, right? Sometimes, because we just run in automatic, we run into just, okay, let me just, meet the quota and make sure I can have that check mark done. And here the invitation is, let's just not conform with checking that check mark, but let's embrace the totality of what emerging into their culture and their beliefs really takes to serve them in ways that we can impact them and we can transform them. So, in conclusion, to minister to Hispanic communities from the margins is to follow the very pattern of Christ, who shows solidarity with the overlooked and made the margins a place of revelation and transformation. Also, it requires cultural awareness that sees beyond a token gesture, right? That's the quota I was talking about. Hospitality that affirms belonging, and formation that empowers Hispanic leaders to shape the church future. Because when the church embraces the gifts, voices, and faith of Hispanic communities, and again, any other underserved community for that matters, it not only becomes more relevant, but it also becomes more faithful to the gospel's vision of one body with many members. And lastly, ministering from the margins is therefore not a strategy of survival, nor fulfilling a quota. It's a prophetic witness that reveals the kingdom of God already breaking into our midst. And I will, before we go into questions and reactions and conversations, I will finish with this. 1 Peter 4, verses 8 and 9 said, above all, love each other deeply, because love covers over a multitude of sins. Offer hospitality to one another without grumbling. Thank you.